matter, no action or vote was taken. We're going to move on to item number 6, the citizen comments. I have 3 people signed up. Are any of the 3 people here to talk about any of the public agenda?
I'm on the agenda, but I don't need to speak right now unless you guys have questions that you wanted to address.
So if we do have questions, she wouldn't be able to speak while we. This is for the. This item, shade tree, to approve the area. We can. Okay. Very good. Well, if there are questions.
When we get to that?
Yep.
Perfect.
I'll ask you to respond at that time.
Okay.
Okay. Another point of administrative point that has come to my attention from Manager Tran. We don't actually have to formally accept any of the reports by vote. What we can continue to do that if people are comfortable with that. We'll do it based on all in favor, all opposed, or I can just ask at this point in the meeting if anybody wants to discuss any particular item, any particular written report. So if there's no objection, I won't ask for a motion to accept. I'll just ask that we've received for August 2014 the treasurer's reports, the financial reports, Act 511, and the trash collection report, the property tax collection report, the police report, the manager's report, the ordinance officer's report, the building inspection report, public works report, REMS report, CVAD, traffic volunteer fire department report, and the engineer's report. And as we get further in the meeting, the manager's report, the mayor's report, if he likes, if the police came, if they want to report, anyone can speak to any of these reports, but we don't actually have to have a formal motion to accept. So at this time, I'll ask, are there any questions for any of the reports that we received? Or any discussion for any of the reports that we received?
I just wanted to know if there wasn't a card.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we added new, the building inspector's report for Greenland Hills.
That's new, right? What page is that?
That's in your report package towards the end of it. And it's basically their invoice that shows all the property safety, the building inspections, and general inspections.
Okay. Thank you for putting it in there.
So before we get, if there's any discussions, what I would do at this time, and I'd ask the engineer to report, if there's anything you want to highlight in your report at this time, feel free to do so, and I'll do the same for the manager, I'll do the same for the mayor.
Am I on?
You are on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just hit a couple spots on some new things. Thomas Street sewer separation project, that project was awarded. We held a pre-construction meeting, and the contractor is anticipating to start work the week of the 29th. So that's over on Thomas Street. Also, for the 2014 road program, we walked the site with the Public Works Director, developed some punch list items, met with the contractor, and those are in the process of being resolved. We'll report on that when they are resolved, and then recommend a final payment to close out that contract. The inlet rehabilitation contract has also been awarded, and waiting the signature of the paperwork back from the contractor. That's expected to start work in mid-October. And that's all I have tonight.
Any questions for the engineer? When we get to the public works, if there's specific questions on any motions, he's going to stick around to answer those questions at that time. Manager Trant, any highlights in your report that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'll just give an overview of the format of the report so you can understand what I'm doing and how I'm using it, and if there's any feedback that you have for me that I can do to improve it. Basically, it's a running list of the issues that are coming across my desk, and it's a snapshot of what we're dealing with and how we're dealing with it, and if there's a timetable associated with it, I have that in there. The goal would be, since this is an interim position, that the person that was hired to take the full-time slot could pick this up and understand what's happening in the borough, and actually that these could then spin off to separate reports, which is happening, for example, on the blight and abandonment process. As I begin to build that, you can see that information is getting a little too voluminous for this list, so that'll probably spin off into a separate report. I've begun to do some summaries of some of the hot topics related to the problem properties, and that information will be separate from this report. You will see action items on the agenda that will percolate from this report, so if you review the report in advance, you can see some history there. Ultimately, some of these things, like the garbage contract tonight, I'll give you a little update, as well as the floodplain ordinance, et cetera, all end up being an item on the agenda for your consideration and action. So unless you have a specific question about something in the overall report or a question about what information I'm putting in there, I don't have any particular highlights other than the ones that I'm going to tell you about as we go through the agenda.
Okay. Mayor, did you have a report this time?
Nothing bad.
Nothing yet? Okay.
Excuse me. I know that the police force was at Crafton Elementary. Can you talk to the public about that?
I'm sorry?
The police force was at Crafton Elementary during numerous drills last week. Can you
Right.
speak to that?
They had the drills in the morning, as far as, intervention into an active shooter and they went through the drills, the evacuation drills at the elementary school. To be honest, I found out subsequent to that, I was not advised prior to this action going on. I actually got it from another source and I talked to the chief about that.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we'll move right into administration with regards to the garbage contract. Manager Trent?
So no action for council to consider taking tonight. I just wanted to let you know, as I told you at the last meeting, we are finalizing the RFP for waste hauling. So just 3 things I wanted to let you know in terms of changes. The draft RFP was posted to the cubby for you to review. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. 3 things, 2 major things, one minor thing. I'll start with the minor. Just some language updating. There was some old carryover language over the years that just really didn't apply to trash collection in Crafton Borough anymore, so we cleaned that up. The 2 big things are the base bid now includes collection of e-waste. As of January 1 of this year, we are no longer allowed by state law to put electronic waste into the garbage. That results in a lot of illegal dumping, TVs at the curb that sit there for weeks, that kind of thing. So we're recommending that we include in the base bid with this RFP that goes out, that the hauler have a program for collection of e-waste. Second big thing is the alleys. So this has been a topic of discussion, as far as I can understand, for years now in the borough and many boroughs that have the infrastructure and the waste collection that Crafton does. So what we proposed is to do a base bid that would include 3 alleys, Alley A, Alley Y, and Prince, in the base bid, because those alleys have to be used for collection. The other alleys would not be included in the base bid. However, we would have an alternate, so that the hauler would provide a cost for including trash collection on all alleys. So then council will be able to make an informed decision about the future of alleys from an infrastructure standpoint, and I'm sure the borough engineer could talk about that in the future, as well as Mr. Kazarowski. But we also need to have a plan for that upgrade of that alley infrastructure if we decide to get the hauling off the alleys. So again, you'll have 2 costs. You'll be able to compare the pros and cons from a cost perspective of taking trash collection off the alleys. But you'll have the option to keep it the way it is now if you wanted to.
I have a quick question regarding that. There's some streets in Grafton that are narrow and size-wise maybe considered, size of an alley. How is that handled?
In terms of putting the collection on the
Yeah,
regular
yeah.
street? Right.
You named just 3 alleys, but there's more streets that are narrow.
Right. Those are the only 3 that we believe that have to be used. The streets in the other scenarios are passable from a hauling standpoint.
Any other questions about that? Okay.
So we're looking to put that out this week. Tomorrow, day after tomorrow, it'll go in the paper. Yeah. And then we'll have back to council on the 22nd of October. We'll have a bid opening on the 22nd of October, and then consider action at the November meeting.
Mr. Trey, did you say that starting January 1st, they won't take any e-trash anymore? Or
This
they
past January.
Oh, they don't take, they're not taking it for a year?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
In the, we did have, Mr. Deasy had an event, and he typically has had an event where we have an opportunity to get rid of our e-waste. He's hosted a couple in Crafton over the last couple of years. But it's also, in speaking with other communities, it's our expectation that adding e-waste to our contract be a very modest addition to it. And it makes the flexibility for the residents. So will we know, Mr. Trapp, will we know what the difference is with e-waste if it's not specially called out for as an alternate bid?
We're not calling it out separately, but we can certainly ask the haulers. I mean, just as frame of reference, I think it's $1 a household. Some of the other communities that we looked at, that I have experience with, it's about $1 a household. It's not a major expense considering the service that it provides.
So it's gonna be pretty modest, I expect.
Per year or per
Mhm.
month?
It's
Per year.
per bill, per month, sorry.
Per month.
We pay once a year, or you can pay in quarters, but I think our last bill was $145. So we go from $145, if it holds true to some other communities, to $157. And you'd be able to put out e-waste at any time throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item, Councilwoman Ms. Post has formally submitted her resignation. Unfortunately, her service has been exemplary, and I certainly, for one, am sorry to see her leave. Do you have anything you want to add, Ms. Post?
Not really.
What?
Not really.
Not really?
I don't know if, I know that my letter was dated October 29th, so I don't know, I hope everybody has read it, but for those in the audience, that I just, in my letter, I just made it, I think, clear that the time and sacrifice that we give to the community can be very burdensome on our families, and it is a request of my family that I spend more time with them, so I honor that. But it's been a great privilege, so I thank everybody for their support and their dedication, and we love Crafton, so you'll be seeing us a lot.
As a matter of administration, right, and so Ms. Post as Vice President of Council, is that something we're going to have to address at the first meeting after her resignation is effective?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll deal with that then. She's Vice President through
October 1st.
through October 1st. So this is your last meeting?
This is my last.
Okay, so at the first October meeting, whatever that turns out to be, we'll be, we'll be nominating and voting on a new Vice President of Council. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the resignation of Councilwoman Tracy Post effective October 1st, 2014.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Yay. Opposed?
No.
So technically, we didn't hear an either yes or a no. Is that an automatic abstain?
I mean,
That's our
Let's,
roll call.
can I guess? I
So, no,
mean-
so this is a classic example of when a roll call is necessary. So in this case, since it's ambiguous, roll call vote, please, on the resignation of Councilwoman Tracy Post.
Mr. Amendola,
Yes.
Ms. Amendola,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
No.
Ms. Post,
Yes.
Ms. Weitzel,
Yes.
Mr. Hicks.
Yes. Thank you. Next item, I talked about this at the last meeting, that I will entertain a motion to authorize the advertisement of an RFP for solicitor services.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on this motion?
I think we're both about to take the same route. Since I was not at the meeting last time, could somebody bring me up to date
Sure.
with the discussion so that I can?
So at the beginning of this year, right, Mr. Amendola mentioned this, at the beginning of this year, when we were doing the votes to extend all of our contracts with the various professional services that we had, he raised the question that perhaps we should, over time, right, revisit all of our professional services organizations and decide whether it's the right professional firm to be working with us, whether it be the services they're offering, the cost for those services, and really have an informed assent of yes, that's who we want to serve us. I've decided I wanted to. We talked about it at the last meeting, and I think now's the right time honestly to examine the solicitor, in part because Manager Trant with us is a lawyer himself, has worked with a lot of communities, and I expect that he's going to be able to give us some guidance and some help with getting some RFPs in from various soliciting firms, and we'll be able to make an informed decision. And I also spoke with our current solicitor because today, about whether or not this was, at all a discredit to him, and quite frankly, it is not. So I expect and would ask you to submit an RFP. This is not an indictment on your services. They've been exemplary to this point, and if you're willing and want to submit, I'd be happy to entertain it, along with whatever else we get, and we'll evaluate it.
Can I ask a question too? I too wasn't at the meeting. I'm concerned about the timing of this change in guard, if you will, because we don't have anyone permanently in place running the borough. We have interim, temporary people, and I would like to see some cohesion and consistency while we manage to hire the permanent replacements of the former manager and former director of borough services. What made this so time pressing?
I don't believe it's time.
It's just for advertisement. It's not to actually do anything at this moment.
I mean, we're going to advertise to solicit, feedback, right, for people that would potentially want to be the solicitor. So if we vote today to advertise it, we're going to get those in, right? We're going to evaluate them, and then we could potentially make a decision. What's the earliest time frame you think, Manager Trant, that we'd actually get responses and/or be prepared to interview and prepared to move forward with a different solicitor?
Well, I think it's reasonable to give people 30 to 45 days to prepare a proposal. And then council does interviews November, December.
End of the year.
January,
Yeah, so it's reasonable that, it's not unreasonable to think that we would have, we'd be able to make a decision at the beginning of next year, right? Which, if we follow our timeline for, the interim manager, right, the interim manager on contract only goes through January. So as far as being cohesive, it seems to me that we would be cohesive through that time period.
So where is the interim management, process? Where are we at with finding a permanent?
Yeah.
Is there-
It seems like there's gonna be a lot of interviewing and a lot of decision-making in December and January. So I'm just concerned I see your point, but I'm concerned about the overlapping in the scope of what we're going to be hiring all at the same time. I'm concerned about that because we've been without a manager and, except for our interim management services, thank you. But I mean, we've known for some time and then we dragged our feet on it and then we have interim in and they are only here for so long. So I'm just wondering about the scope of priority and the pace. I'm getting concerned about that pace.
Since,
So is there, what's the progression happening with that portion?
can we
The
speak to that
manager
now?
portion?
Yes.
So in the manager's report, I've been updating some dates in terms of targets for job posting. So on the October 13th council meeting, you will have a draft job description and job posting. At your December 27th meeting, again, trying to work at council's suggestion of keeping the meetings with the discussion and then action meeting with the meeting the second half of the month. The action will be taken at the December 27th or October 27th meeting to approve the job posting and the advertising. It will be advertised in November, interviews December and January, and with a start date of February 1.
Mr. President,
Yes.
this solicitor thing appears, why not stick EMS? Our auditors and the rest of them wanted it. This just doesn't make any sense. But, in January of this year, when the council reorganized January of this year, and they went through the whole list of people that were to be approved for the position. Now, I could see going for an RFP if Mr. Abrams' firm was not doing the job. Is there a problem with the EMS, a problem with the fire department, a problem with the building inspector? Should you just, like, at will, just throw one out? Okay, we're in an RFP for next month. We'll have another position. We're going to throw out an RFP. These people are already approved by this council. It just, like in midstream, as April said, in midstream, it just does to me, as a non-voting member of this body, it just doesn't make any sense. That's what I'd like to say.
Does anybody else want to speak?
No, we have a motion on this?
Yeah, there's a motion right now to authorize the advertisement.
And it's been seconded?
Yeah, it's been second. We wouldn't
Yes,
discuss
we're
it
in
unless
We're in
it-
the discussion.
Moved and seconded.
At the reorganizational meeting, myself as well as Councilman Anadola were questioning several contracts, as you had mentioned. So we as council weren't all in agreement. We had our own questions, so I'm not sure.
So we were told in January that the solicitor is on a month-to-month contract. And that could be done anytime. Didn't need to be done in January. So no one wanted to hear anything about it in January. And they said it would be, it's a month-to-month thing, it can be done anytime. Well, I think it's time that it's getting done.
I don't know why you're addressing me per se, but again,
Well, you had the question.
I'll reiterate, in the list of priorities of what we have, how did this escalate to the top of a priority where we're actually voting on it right now?
Well, we had this discussion at the last meeting. We've already discussed this.
So there's no answer to my question? Is that,
I think it's kind of late in coming, really. We've been here 7 months.
okay.
Well, let me ask you a question. When do you think would be an appropriate time?
Once you get the permanent staff in place, allow them to have input into who's the best fit for the borough.
Well, we wouldn't ask the solicitor to speak to our hiring decision for the borough manager. We might ask our labor attorney to help us with that hiring decision, but not our solicitor. And we're not suggesting changing the labor attorney now. So, what role would the solicitor play in
I'm
that hiring
saying the
decision?
permanent borough management should have input into this.
You're saying the permanent borough
Not
manager should...
interim, not someone in here temporarily. The permanent people should have input into this. I would like to see us focus
We're
as
the
a
people that
council.
should have the input.
The borough manager won't have a vote in who's the solicitor,
We make those decisions.
right?
I understand who makes the decisions. I'm just stating my viewpoint.
Okay.
I get concerned that we bite off more than we can chew and that belabors the process. So, you're right, these kinds of positions, are at will. But look at our, look at our process of fulfillment of these positions.
Is there a
It takes us-
process?
Well, it takes us quite some time. I mean,
It does, we need to get started,
I guess that's another way of looking at it.
you know?
All right, if does anyone else want to discuss this? I want to give everyone the opportunity to raise their concerns or ideas. Otherwise, we'll vote on the motion to advertise. Anyone? All right, we'll do a roll call vote for this one.
Mr. Amendola,
Yes.
Ms. Amendola,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
This is just for advertising, correct?
correct,
Yes.
Ms. Post,
No.
Ms. Weitzel,
No.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes. Okay, moving on to budget and finance. This is just a reminder that the first budget meeting is going to be held on October 20th. Do you want to speak to what we're going to be talking about in that first budget meeting to remind everyone?
Yeah, two things. You will receive actually on October 13th, Ms. Grass is going to cover that meeting because I'm out of town, and that's a good opportunity for her to bring you a draft summary budget. So you'll first see some numbers beginning on October 13th. Then on October 20th, we will have our first formal budget meeting, and that meeting will be substantially a discussion about capital improvements planning. So we'll be working with the interim public works director and the borough engineer to do some planning for infrastructure and capital improvements over the next several years.
Okay. All right, no action to be taken there. There's just an update. So moving on, 2000, in the pension, 2015 minimum municipal obligation, police and non-uniform pension funds. I'll entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2014-16, adopting the 2015 minimum municipal obligation for the police and non-uniform employees pension funds.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion on this motion?
When was the contract passed? It was in spring, wasn't it? January 1. And this is gonna be an additional financial burden on the borough, correct?
This is the annual.
Yeah, Mr. Tran, can you explain to us what we're voting on here and that this is a, yearly thing that we do?
Right, so every year, the borough has to obligate a certain amount of funds for your budgeting purposes for the following year towards the non-uniformed and uniform pensions. So you have a police pension and a non-uniform pension. That is calculated pursuant to a formula based on how many employees you have, and that number is given to the borough to then pass a resolution, ideally pass a resolution, so you can document that you're allocating those funds for next year.
Okay, so this is not a change in the contract?
This is not a change in the contract, no.
Okay.
No, it's actually, more a motion, a resolution to adhere to the contract that we've already approved.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this motion?
This includes the contribution by the police themselves, the 5%
That's
for
part of the
contract.
calculation, correct.
Okay, no more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next in Parks and Recreation. I will entertain a motion to authorize the Crafton Borough Park and Shade Tree Commission to operate, maintain, and fund a community food garden within the area of Crafton Park formerly used as a volleyball court, as described in the Shade Tree Commission Community Garden proposal dated September 18, 2014.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this motion or questions for Andrea at this time?
In the comprehensive recreation plan that we had a grant for, built a committee around, and, put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in, where was the community garden recommended to go?
Nowhere. There was no mention of a community garden.
Okay.
It was my recollection that it was not part of the plan that we put together, that this was something that came up more recently from Andrew.
In that larger plan, was there not, I believe that area was designated, I want to say, I'm just going off my visual memory, I want to say that area was for tennis courts. And if we move ahead with the recreation plan, I think that tennis courts could be something that would be very valuable for us. And even making, coordinated efforts with the high school, because I know that the high school, their tennis team goes to Settlers Ridge. So, which is not in the district, so,
Actually, I think that might have been designated for a shelter, because that land is not stable there. We had tennis courts here before, and there's a spring, a natural spring, and the tennis court was always cracking.
okay. I was just going by my visual.
So is there a cement or some sort of foundation underneath the volleyball court? I would assume there is, since those were tennis courts.
I think they left the original.
I guess my overall question is that the proper place for the community garden?
Well, it's my understanding
They're
that
raising it.
yeah, my understanding is that the garden itself is all raised beds, so it's short of, and Andrea, you can speak to this now if you like, but as it was explained by Andrea last week, right, it's all raised beds, and there was some concern that it never had been drilled before, that there was never anything toxic, there was never a gas station there before, so there was certain kind of rudimentary things that they had evaluated about the site, but that whether or not there was a concrete pad or there now or was irrelevant to what you were going to need to do.
right?
Well, the way I've envisioned the garden is that it would be raised beds. That way you don't have to worry about, anything being too permanent. So if the borough decides at a later date, we don't want this garden here, that it doesn't have to be there anymore and it won't hurt anything. It'll be, I guess, as least amount of intrusion as possible. And so that